Hello, everybody, and welcome into the Apples and Ginos Fantasy Hockey Podcast. My name is Blake Creamer, and in this podcast, my guest and I are diving into the Central Division to find some hidden gems for your fantasy squads. We've got one player from every team, all with an ADP of 150 or higher, who could give you some sneaky value and maybe even win you your leagues. Let's get to biz. Oh, yeah. Welcome in, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us here on the Apples and Ginos Fantasy Hockey Podcast, the #1 fruit-based fantasy hockey podcast out there. We feel good about that. My name is Blake Creamer. I'll be your host today. Check us out, Apples and Ginos on YouTube. We're doing stuff over there. Check out the Apples and Ginos Discord. Link is in the description. All that good stuff. The off-season content train rolls on, and we got a good one here for you today. I got my friend with me and my brother in fantasy, Louis Boulet of lb-hockey.com, returning to give his thoughts on 8 more players. It was so fun, we thought we'd do it again, right, Louis?
Yeah, listen, once you floated the idea of returning for the Central one, there was no hesitation. You know, I've said it before, I'll say it again. It's a blast recording these, and it's helping on my side too to kind of do some digging on players before the deadline gets too tight for me to be like, oh crap, I gotta just pick and like get ready for the draft. This is a nice pre-scout that I don't usually have the opportunity to do. So I'm happy you're bringing me on to do this.
Well, that's awesome, buddy. And I'm happy to provide that service for you. All right. I'm here to, like, your victories in fantasy are my victories. All right. And I feel good about that. Plus, I'm also going to probably hit you up for the Ottawa Senators one as well. I know you'll be into that, Louis. But yeah, you know what? One thing when we talked last time, I've never really asked you, like, besides work, like, what have you been doing this summer? What does that look like for you? Have you been getting out, like what kind of things are you into?
I mean, listen, it's a lot of hockey-related stuff, even outside of the LV hockey work. I still play around 2 to 3 times a week on myself with beer leagues throughout the entire year, and that includes the summer. Visited some family up in Winnipeg in July, so that was nice. Got to hang out with my cousins, aunts, uncles, and grandparents, so that was a good time as well. It's been nice and relaxed with some work here and there, and that's pretty much the end of it. I'm usually a pretty more of an introvert and all that and relaxed guy when it comes to doing things. So if I have time to do some stuff hockey related here and there and chill, I'm pretty happy.
Dang, I love that, buddy, because it's the exact same summer I'm having here. People are like, what'd you do this summer? I'm like, fantasy hockey. Is there anything wrong with this? No.
That's normal, right? Yeah, this is just what everyone does.
That's right, buddy. There's nothing wrong with us. Okay, we're completely normal, well-adjusted human beings. All right, and I feel good about that. But Louis, we got to get into this, okay? And everybody, I want to say for the best experience for this episode here, you definitely want to go on over to YouTube and check it out so you can see all the data, visualizations available over at lb-hockey.com. Louis is going to be walking us through some of those. We got some for every player. We got 8 players locked and loaded, all right? And one thing I do want to say as well, it's important to remember about these players that we're talking about. They're players of interest, right? These are guys that, whether they have something going on under the hood that looks good or they already have some, opportunity available to them and they're being undervalued by the fantasy community. We got to check these guys out. All right. And that's what Louis and I are here to do. So we want to highlight some of the people here. These aren't must-draft players. They're just players of interest. All right. And we feel good about that. Louis, are you ready?
Absolutely. I am.
He's ready to rock, and so am I. All right, let's start over in Chicago. We got to talk about Frank Nazar. Yeah. I don't even know if I'm saying that man's name right. Nazar. How do you say it, Louis?
I say it Nazar. I think I could pull up his elite prospects page and see, but that's just how I've called it.
Let's do that. You do that in the background. All right. We want to get this man's name right. All right. But I'm going to call him Frank Nazar for now. Let's look at what Frank was able to do this season here. In 53 games with the Blackhawks, he did get 26 points. That's pretty nice. A 40-point pace. Nothing super special in terms of periffs. He had 30 hits, 35 blocks. That's fine. Just under 16 minutes average time on ice. But why is this guy a player of interest? I think that there's some potential opportunity down the road for Frank Nazar. Obviously, this team here in Chicago, not the deepest. And I think that there's some top 6 minutes that could be had as well. Does this guy get access to, ace Connor Bedard? I think there's some potential there. What do you think about Frank Nazar, Louis? And tell me about some of the things that you like about this player.
So first, I'm just going to say I went to the Elite Prospects page. They say Nazar, and I have heard that, but I don't know. I'm going to continue saying Nazar because that's just what I'm used to until I actually find a correction. But anyway, yes, Nazar. First of all, he was one of my favorite. I think probably my favorite player at the time of the 2022 draft. So when we decided to lock him in for this, I went back to pull up my notes on him, like my scouting report pre-draft from that year, and just to try to see how much of that still stands. And at the time, I was very impressed with his offensive brain, his inside-driven, high-paced play, the skating. I mean, it's elite. It remains elite. The way he uses crossovers, and even then the defensive commitment, we could see it here. These are the what we have currently are the multi-gear cards. So they're kind of the foundation of all the tools at LB Hockey. They hold a lot of data, a lot of statistics. So it's a little more condensed. You might need to zoom in maybe, or just generally take more time to get all the insights you need. But there's a lot of info here, and as you can see here for Nazar in the zone defense category, sure the results aren't great, but again he's on Chicago, and even accounting for that, whatever. But everything else in terms of having the puck is really good. So the retrieval rate is really strong. His ability to turn those into breakouts and not turn it over are also really, really high. And that's thanks to him just being generally committed to being very engaged on the defensive side of the puck. And then we move over to the transition aspect. As we can see, he's got the elusive carrier badge. So that means he's very, very good at drawing penalties and carrying the puck efficiently. He enters the zone at a very high rate. And a lot of the times that is with possession and control. So that's something that is always, I don't know if you mentioned this when I had you on in the past, but you had talked with Corey Schneider from All Three Zones before. And that is one of those skills that is less team dependent and more, if a player has this early on, that's something that they're probably going to be able to sustain, especially as they continue to hone their craft and all that. But usually high-paced players who have good control of the puck, this is a very repeatable skill. And that's something Nazar definitely has with the blend of his mind, his hands, and his skating. And one thing that... Sorry, go on. Yeah.
Oh, no, you go ahead. Finish up.
Okay, I was just going to say that we'll dive into playthrough contact a little bit later as we were talking before we started recording, but he's a player that at such a young age, he's adapted fairly well to physicality early on. And I think right now it's mostly just a question of consistency. His game-to-game performance has been whatever, but given that they're adding Burakovsky now, Teravainen was he there last year already, I think? Donato has shown that he can be a little better. Maybe Oliver Moore, as he's coming up, is another skater who can keep up with him. Talk about really fluid skaters. That's some guy that could fly with them maybe. And the PP1 spot on lock, I think there's definitely a lot to Frank Nazar and his fantasy potential next year.
Yeah, so you said it's Nazar. That reminds me of Austin Powers. Mini-me, stop humping the Nazar, right? You ever see Austin Powers?
It's been a while, but yes.
Okay, all right. It's not my best work, but I love all that. That's all kind of hitting the spot there. And I like what you said again about the zone entries. That's why, just some of those initial conversations I had with Corey, and he mentioned the exact same thing you just said. That's a skill you kind of come in with and you keep, right? And it's a calling card for these high-paced players, guys like Jack Hughes, right? Jesper Bratt, some of the best rushers in the league. They do that so well. And Frank Nazar, he's not Jack Hughes, but he's got that skill kind of locked down. So it's just kind of building out the rest of his repertoire. I think that there's a great chance that Nazar's going to be in the top 6. I think there's no question there. He did spend most of last year with Toivo Teravainen and Tyler Bertuzzi kind of flanking him. So that's okay. But I think the real thing that we'd love to see is him play some games with Connor Bedard, which he did as well. He spent some time with Bedard and Bertuzzi on a line as well. So I just think there's a lot of potential here. One thing too, I do like his chances on the power play. I've projected him on the power play. So has Nate. But Nate and I have talked about the Chicago power play. It could be a mixed bag this year, right? It's obviously great to be on power play 1. But Chicago's power play is a little bit misleading in my opinion. digging in on that, the team had the 5th best power play on the year last year. Chicago, that's insane. In terms of goals for per 60, but they were 2nd worst in expected goals for per 60. So they were just massively.
That's the Bedard finishing effect. Like,
yeah,
that's
absolutely. And that's how elite that man is. But is that something we can rely on for fantasy? Like, it's not. I don't see them repeating as kind of the 5th best power play in terms of conversion, right? So I think they ran super hot. But yeah, and we also got a new coach in there. So I'm tempering expectations with the Chicago power play. That said, Nazar should still be on there. I gave him around 2.5 minutes power play time on ice just for the projection. I did project him for, 47 points, 20 goals, 27 assists. Not too shabby, right? And his ADP, folks, 243 on Fantrax. You can pick up a guy like Frank Nazar, 243. I think he has the ability to smash 47 points, but it's going to take I think he's got to be with Bedard and he's got to get power play 1. And that power play has to remain as effective as they were last year, in my opinion. One more thing about Nazar that I like, he kills penalties. He did some penalty killing last year as well. So there's a little bit of extra value there. But I do think this is absolutely a player of interest, a guy you could take a shot on. And for dynasties, like obviously, right? You got this guy in your squad. This guy's going to be good to go. What do you think about his potential just for his career? Like, do you see any kind of comparables that you would, to put you on the spot just with Frank Nazar here?
Comparables a little hard because I don't want to say, like, I know the default for a lot of guys, like when, as a Sens fan, when I saw Tim Stützle coming over, I immediately thought Matt Barzal. And I think that's the default for a lot of people, for like someone who is an unbelievable transition ace, but won't be that franchise level player. Mm-hmm. But I don't know, because I think Nazar's defensive commitment has always really intrigued me, and I think there can be a lot of two-way potential there. It's just that word's kind of been tainted in the sense that usually tends to bring down a player's offense, except for guys like Barkov, right? You don't really see, and even then, that's not a player who's the most dynamic with his feet, right? Mm-hmm. He does everything well, but he doesn't have breakaway speed. So I think it's hard to find that, because the way he brings that inside drive and everything else all over the ice, it's hard to me to find a comparable. And I was so high on him. I mentioned it. I think I had him ranked either 2 or 3 in the 2022 draft. So I was really hoping to see him grow. And his first season, 53 games. I don't know if this dashboard is up to, hold on. Yeah, 53 games, 12 goals, 14 assists. Pretty solid. And of anyone that could have like an absolutely massive explosion in points just because he kind of gets it even more and applies his explosive play, he's definitely one of the best options that low available.
I love that. Well, shout out to Frank Nazar, whatever you want to call him. He's an absolute unit, and we salute you, my man. All right, let's move over to the Colorado Avalanche, and we got to talk about Sam Malinsky. No. All right. We're going to talk about Arturi Lehkonen. But shout out to Sam Malinsky. The man's a legend. We'll talk about him another time, but we got Arturi Lehkonen locked and loaded here. This is a guy that I've been interested in for a lot of years, honestly, because of the sheer ice time that he gets out there with really good players. Like, just that alone, you're like, okay, well, this is definitely a guy we should have some interest in. But he's put together some really nice seasons here as well. I mean, last year with Colorado, 69 games, pretty nice. 45 points, that's good. But a career high 27 goals just in the 69 games there. So that's really nice. He had a very efficient season. The minutes, they were crazy. He played not even his career high, but it was up in the 20s, 20 minutes, 23 seconds average time on ice. Really nice. And, he didn't really get a lot of power play 1 last year. So he had a decent season without power play 1. This is a guy that's pretty clutch that I've seen in the past as well. He scores some big goals for the team. But I'm very interested in your thoughts on Arturi Lehkonen here, Louis, because we've got an amazing rusher and puck mover in Marty Necas, who's now potentially playing with Nathan MacKinnon, who we know is elite as they come. What type of role is Arturi Lehkonen going to have on that potential line? Because that's sort of where looks like he's going to be lining up this season.
Yeah, and I've been asking myself that, because there's like the 2024-25 season here for him was not necessarily bad, but it definitely wasn't without turmoil. Obviously, when you have a player of the stature of Rantanen moving out and someone as good as Necas coming in, it's going to take some time to adapt. And even ignoring that, his defensive side took a bit of a sharp dip, but that doesn't really affect the fantasy side of things if you're looking at points.
Right.
As long as he keeps getting those peripherals and those points, that's not something that's really going to matter on that score sheet. But yeah, so that deal kind of threw off this balance and his comfort spot, I would say. Here we have the offensive puck movement profile. There's a whole article on how the different they're called centrality measures, the way we evaluate a player's impact on the movement in a network. But here we could see his influence is in the 5th percentile or sorry, not his influence, his flow is in the 5th percentile for forwards. And that took a pretty big dip after being around 80th last year. So it kind of threw off how he was able to position himself as a main connection between other guys. So probably on the chemistry side and how he thinks the game didn't mesh as well with Natchez. And I think Natchez in general is a player that's a bit wild and hard to fully understand. But he's still very good regardless. It's just the way he works on the ice takes some getting used to. Mm-hmm. And so he played a bit with Natchez. He played a good bit with Nichushkin, I believe, too. Him, McKinnon, and Nichushkin last year.
Yep.
But just with how Lehkonen was oriented and behaved in the passing sequences, he ended up becoming not super important in moving those pucks forwards and defaulted to a more support tertiary role, which is fine. And he already is kind of that tertiary piece on that line due to the shutdown ability he provides. And essentially turning himself into more of a safety net if like other passing plays or set plays failed. But I'm curious because I know the time on ice is there for the taking for him next year, but Landeskog, I'm assuming, returns, and he's been essentially just a better version of Lehkonen, both in the offensive side and just even like when he had that line, like the best line in the league at the time of Landeskog, McKinnon, Rantanen. Landeskog was arguably the best third forward on a top line in the league, given the checking ability, the offense, and how he was able to support the puck moving of Rantanen and McKinnon. So it's very much a cloudy picture for me on Lehkonen. But no matter what, you have strong guys to play with in that top 6. It's just a matter of if he's getting those McKinnon minutes or not.
Yeah, that's very interesting. You mentioned about the flow there, and you said that last year his percentage in that metric was 80%. Is that right?
Yeah.
And
so
now this year it's 5.
Yeah. So if we look at the little timeline chart in the top right of the profile, the darker green line is the flow. And it drops. It was his best score, and because he was really good at just advancing sequences from teammate to teammates last year in 2020 through 24. So it was a little bit above 75th percentile. It seems to be around 80th, and then drops abruptly, which is pretty crazy given that none of the other ones really fell. And I think that's very much just a chemistry issue with the new guy. He was still able to produce, albeit it did hinder him a little bit. I think he went from 60 something point pace to closer to 50. So, not the biggest drop, but it did hurt his overall output. So I'm really interested because these types of metrics rely a lot on just understanding how your teammates move the puck and how to best position yourself. And he kind of realized, I'm just going to be kind of the fallback guy who's going to ensure that those possessions can keep moving if there's any interruptions with the main guys, rather than fully integrating himself as a piece that through which the puck can continue to flow towards a shot. So it's definitely interesting and something I'm going to keep an eye on for sure.
Yeah. That's really unique. I mean, when I've kind of been digging in on some lines that I really enjoy, like I always think about Scheifele, Kyle Connor, and Gabriel Velarde. That's a line I think of. And I feel like Lehkonen, with the addition of Natchez, he kind of becomes that Velarde guy where, it's more about board battles, getting the pucks to these guys that are zipping the puck around and sort of just getting in position and firing the puck when it comes to you, right? And I think that's an interesting piece, and I wonder what that means for Lehkonen's value moving forward. But I mean, at the very least, he's going to be playing in the top 6, right? If he doesn't play with Mac and Natchez, he's going to be down playing with Brock Nelson, which is the best second center they've had there in Colorado for a long time. So regardless of where Landeskog is, I think Lehkonen's still going to get some good opportunity, probably power play too. I mean, I do look at last season as well. I was digging in on his IPP at all strengths. It was the lowest of his career, but the on-ice shooting percentage and the shooting percentage were career highs. So, I mean, that's,
Yeah.
we talked about the Bedard effect on the power play. That's this right here with Lehkonen, the McKinnon effect, right? And now Natchez. You got guys that are really good at these high danger passes, putting Lehkonen in good spots to, convert. And that's what he did. So in terms of projection for Lehkonen, I've got 25 goals, 30 assists for 55 points. His ADP is 185. I mean, what do you think he's going to be? What do you think is a ceiling case points wise for Lehkonen this year?
I could see him go back towards a ceiling over a full season. Given that there's more depth in the top six for Colorado, I could say maybe like low 60s. I could see him get to that, but I don't think he goes much higher given just that Landeskog is back, and I think that's gonna stop him a lot. I do think there's always a chance, given that the injury to Landeskog was so massive in a sense that they kind of slow his roll into the season. But he was firing on all cylinders in the playoffs, right? Like it looked like he had barely missed much time. So I think low 60s is probably a good higher end projection for me, because obviously there's going to be injuries that are going to bring that down in terms of pace. But that's kind of where he's lined up in previous seasons before, when he was getting the most optimal deployment.
Yep. No, I think there's still going to be some value with Lehkonen here. And I do think that efficiency is probably here to stay as long as he's, plays in that top six there. One thing about Lehkonen that I'd like to see come back, the periffs, his hitting and his, blocks down a little bit. This is a guy that's had, over 100 hits in multiple seasons. His first season in Colorado, full season, he had 93 hits. So I'd like to see that come back. There's a little bit more value there, but regardless, I think this is a guy you absolutely want to have in your team, because of he's going to bludgeon his way to some points just by being out on the ice there. So shout out to Lehkonen. We feel good about that. Let's move on over to Dallas. We're talking about Tyler Seguin. All right. I have a lot of hate for Tyler Seguin and Jamie Benn because of how they talked Yang on the Sedins like 10 years ago. And I'm like an elephant, man. I don't forget. All right. I don't forget what Seguin did, but he's playing pretty damn well. So I have to respect him for the fantasy element here. Let's look at what Tyler Seguin was able to do last year. He had a great year in a really small sample size. Was only able to play 20 games, but had 21 points, 86-point pace. No. All right. That's not real, but I mean, it certainly was a nice little pocket of games that he had there. He was very efficient with his shooting percentage. Ice time was just over 16 minutes. So nothing crazy there. He wasn't getting power play one. He was just playing massively efficient, and his line, Mason Marchment and Matt Duchene, they were really cooking last year. One of the best third lines, if not the best third line in the league in terms of conversion and just danger out there, right? That was a very dangerous line. So talk to me about Seguin. I mean, one thing I noticed digging in on him, the scoring chances, the individual scoring chances that he was able to accrue last year, off the hook. I mean, it was nuts. He was on the year, and again, small sample size, he ranked 6th overall, according to Natural Stat Trick, in individual scoring chances 4/60. 6th. That's Tyler Seguin. So do you think that that's something that's real? Is that something we can expect? And also, where do you see him lining up this year?
So I'm happy you're asking that question, because I literally turned to Bluesky and my Dallas Stars mutuals to be like, I'm going through my data right now when I was building this new tool we'll get to in a couple players. And I was like, this Seguin data is unbelievable. Like, is this real? Like, or should I be looking at a possible problem in how I'm handling the data here? But no, you're right. It's 100% real. He was an absolute bandit in front of the net in an obviously limited sample. Sure, it was only 20 games, and it could be a bit of an aberration, but you look at it in 2023-24, he ranked 82nd percentile in net front play, and in 2022-23, I think it was 92nd percentile amongst forwards, and just a generally really good tendency to thrive on low cycle plays. So it's not really a surprise to see him do that well low in the zone. And given the volume and the efficiency, like if it was one of the two, maybe I'd understand that it could be not super repeatable, but the fact he was doing both is what really, really intrigued me and got him to lead all forwards in my data set for 2024-25 on that side of things. So I'm really interested with how they do their lines in Dallas. Like, they don't have Marchment anymore, and yes, that Marchment Duchene Seguin line, you said it was probably the best third line in the league, but I'd argue for the first 20 games of the season, you could even put forward an argument that they were the best line in the league, period, at the start. Yep. And in the playoffs, that continued almost. They were exceptional there. I think I was looking at daily faceoffs to see what's projected. I think they have Wyatt Johnston at 2C there with Sens legend Matt Duchene on the left wing and then Seguin on the right. So with that, Wyatt is another guy who's really good in front of the net and down low. They could really work a nice low zone overload strategy with that line and with a lot of behind the net play to kind of try to overwhelm some goaltenders with the low side to side and low to high movement. But yeah, it's definitely something that I'll be looking at for Seguin. And what we have here is his progression tracker, looking at how his ability to help his team score has gone over the last 4 years. And he's been aging like wine, and if not wine, at least some like solid cheese, I would say. Like a post dinner cheese at a decent establishment.
Oh, okay. Oh, that sounds all right.
I'd say I'm French, so this is like that's just the analogies I'm gonna go to. All right. But yeah, his chance generation and his conversion rate have been at least steady, if not improving, most of the last few years. And there's even been upticks on the defensive and puck carrying side. So there aren't really many signs of slowing down for him, like at all. So it's definitely a guy that, probably won't hold that 86-point pace. He's past those years, but something in the 60s with some good goal scoring is a pretty decent bet for Tyler.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel like last season is definitely an outlier, right? Based even just digging in on some of the, the all three zone stuff, the natural stat trick, all the individual chance and shot generation. But this guy did lead the league in shots and goal off of high danger passes per 60, according to Corey's data, which is pretty damn nice. I mean, that's Matt Duchene right there doing his thing. But, I think that was just an amazing line that he had there. But you lose Mason Marchment. Well, now we got Wyatt Johnston in here. Like, what the hell?
That's arguably an improvement.
Yeah,
well, not just arguably, it is.
Yeah, absolutely an improvement. I mean, that's a guy that plays with pace. I mean, he's got a great flow himself, Wyatt Johnston, connecting players. And obviously, like, I've talked Yang on Matt Duchene for a lot of years on this pod until I started digging in on microstats, which was just like a year ago. And then I was like, oh, like this guy is actually like a savant. Like he's ridiculous in the offensive zone, right? So, he drives offense, chance assists, shot assists off the hook for Matt Duchene, and Seguin's still going to be with him, but now he's got Wyatt Johnston yet. So are we excited? Yeah, I think so. We should possibly be. But yeah, I do think that Seguin has really adapted his game to now this sort of net front play. As an older player, I think that's the right thing to do, and obviously he's got the line mates to make it happen now. And I think that he's going to get even a little bit more opportunity than he did last year, right? He averaged 60 minutes, 9 seconds last season. I think that goes up, right? Maybe not crazy, but maybe he averages around 17 minutes. I also like Dallas is one of my favorite teams going into this year. Like
I love watching them play, man. Like,
yeah, I think they're an absolute wagon, and they deserved better last year in terms of just their offense, right? Because they were generating a ton. They were a little bit inefficient. And I do like Glenn Gullikson as well, the new coach in there. I think that he's going to let out the reins even more for some of these offensive players. Maybe now that Dallas, that third line has kind of been dismantled, I think we're going to have a true top 6 there and maybe a bottom 6. So I think that's going to equal a little bit more value for some of their players. And I think their power play is going to be a hell of a lot better. Dallas's power play last year was 17th overall in conversion, despite being 3rd overall in expected goals for, right? So
I think a lot of that is Heiskanen being gone later on and his setting effect kind of losing it. But you also have Maverick Bourque coming in, who's another option that I looked into for a Seguin line mate. But yeah, it's there's a lot cooking there. And for the last couple of years, they've kind of been, after the Sens and Jets get eliminated, they've been my team of interest in the playoffs. So it's a very fun team to watch. A lot of LB hockey stamp of approval players in there that I'd love to keep my eye on.
Oh, buddy, let's get to biz. They got the LB hockey stamp of approval, and we're here for that. All right. But Tyler Seguin, his ADP, 201. All right, that's insane value. That's on Fantrax. I projected him for 56 points, 24 goals, 32 assists. That's probably light. I think that's a conservative projection for Tyler Seguin based on the opportunity and deployment that he's probably going to get. A lot of this depends too. Like I baked in, he's coming back off of a pretty significant injury, right? So he'll have the full summer to train and be, healthy coming in here. But I do think 56 points is a little light. I could absolutely see him getting 60. even 65. I think 65 is probably ceiling for for Tyler Seguin, but this is a player you should absolutely take a swing on at 201. So there you go. Let's move on to the Minnesota Wild, and we're going to talk about the ultimate dingus, Ryan Hartman. He does that. He's a wiener. We know this, but I think that there's some good stuff here for fantasy with Ryan Hartman, and there might be a little bit of opportunity for him as well. So let's dig in real quick on Ryan Hartman. Just to talk about his season stats here: 69 games, 26 points last year. That's a 31-point pace. That show ain't no good, Ryan. But that's fine. His ice time was down about a minute and a half from the season previous. He was, pretty inefficient with his shooting percentage, career low 7% shooting percentage that he shot last year in 24-25. And he wasn't getting a bunch of power play time. So definitely a down season for Ryan Hartman, but I think there's some room for optimism here with this player. I think that some space is opened up in Minnesota's top 9 for sure, and I think that this guy looks pretty good under the hood. What do you think about Ryan Hartman here, Lou?
So I've been high and low on Hartman just personally because as you said, of the type of game he plays and how it can make him the enemy of the people a lot for other teams. But I've had him as an add and drop in a lot of my leagues in the past, and I've really liked him in that role. And I think there could be a big explosion on his side there, fantasy wise. Maybe that's next year or whatever. But there's some stuff that needs to happen. And first, that's on the line mate side of things. The good part for him is that Minnesota, now that they've got that cap space finally with the Parise and Suter buyouts gone, I think, right? Starting this year, I believe they're all gone.
Yeah, I think so.
That now they've been able to kind of flesh out some stuff more. They've brought in guys that they've had in the pipeline. They've drafted fairly well over the last few years, and they're finally kind of getting the fruits of that labor now. And he didn't really have much of a stable spot last season in that lineup. Some of that is due to the smaller sample with injury. But mostly he played with, I'd say over the last 2 years, it was mostly Marcus Johansson and Marco Rossi. Big fan of Marco Rossi. Dude used to live in my neighborhood when he was a 67s player, and I've got his jersey in my closet right now. So I'm always going to get a chance. Whenever I have a chance to praise him, I will. But back to Hartman. He centered Kaprizov and Zuccarello in 2023-24 and 2022-23 a fair bit. I don't know that he gets back to that because of some of the play of Joel Eriksson-Ek over the last few years and how much they've just Boldy's insurgence as an absolutely elite player. Loved him. He was on my teams in the past for fantasy. Yep. But I think if I were to build up some lines, if he gets to play with Kaprizov, great. Personally, I don't think it's going to happen. So if you give Boldy and Kaprizov some time together, which they've shown to do really well, but just it seems like the Wild haven't fully committed to that. Yep. But give those two, Joel Eriksson-Ek at center, you kind of improve Kirill's heart bid by loading up that front line, which he showed he can be a contender for last year before the injury. Then Hartman with Rossi and Zuccarello, who we have here in the line compatibility tool. Obviously, it seems like Connor Bedard really there could be some improved shooting on that line, maybe, which with Connor Bedard as the ideal third piece for every possible duo on this line.
You could probably say that about any line in the league, honestly.
You could, but it's funny to see them fit stylistically like this. Zuccarello bringing a lot of passing prowess, Rossi some two-way underlying play driving and help on exits, and then Hartman fills in kind of the power forward side, right, with the checking ability, the shooting, and even some puck carrying, which is nice. And then even though it doesn't really matter here, you have a mix of guys in Ogren, Yurov, Tarasenko, and Foligno for the third line. And again, any of those guys, if Hartman plays with them, those are still great options. I've always been a big fan of Liam Ogren. Mm-hmm. Danil Yurov has been a really interesting prospect as well. Hartman is also a guy that's very physical, right? We've talked about this, and he's just an absolute wrecking ball out there. I mean, there's literally the wrecking ball badge on this dashboard because specifically of him.
Yep.
And I know the hit volume has been it's been good. It's been fine, but it hasn't been anything crazy. It's just the way that he plays and uses his body really makes me think that if, it gets to a point where he needs to use it a tiny bit more and realizes that he can be a little more proactive with it, given how well he can shoulder all that physicality and contact, it could really result in an explosion in hit volume. And as you mentioned, just a sprinkling of finishing luck for the guy would do wonders given how well he grades in all of our shot generation metrics. So there's a lot under the hood here that could really drive high value for Hartman.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree with that. I think there is a pathway to some top six there. Like obviously the Minnesota Wild signed Tarasenko there. So he's probably earmarked for that second line. But I could see, I think what's going to happen is something similar to what Daily Faceoff is showing here, which is Kaprizov, Eriksson Ek, and then probably the Zucchini Man, Matt Zuccarello on the right side, just because he's a right winger. And then I think it's going to be between Hartman and Tarasenko to play with Boldy and Rossi. So
I think even if they start Tarasenko, they might realize that Hartman may be a better option. I mean, Tarasenko, another Sens legend, love the guy, but like at this point in his career, I do think Hartman is easily the better option there. Like Boldy does everything. You don't really need to fill any sort of specific gap that he leaves. Like the arguably one of the best well-rounded young players in the league. And sure, when you can add finishing value on Tarasenko, that's good. But Hartman just brings that edge. He really does. And I think that's something that's going to give him a bit more of a favorable spot to play with those guys on the second line.
Yeah. Well, for fantasy, I think Hartman on that second line over Tarasenko is much more valuable. Like Tarasenko to me, the one thing about that is like the Wild signed Tarasenko. Like if they put him on the third line, that's not really where his value is. You know what I mean? This is a guy that, like you said, is a finisher, can, with Matt Boldy and Marco Rossi, it makes sense. But, in terms of fantasy, if Ryan Hartman's on that line, we're going to get a ton more value out of Ryan Hartman on the second line than we are Tarasenko on the second line. And yeah, like just on Hartman too, I was digging in on some of the all three zone stuff. Like this is a guy that makes offense happen, right? I mean, I was surprised. Like I know he's a good individual shot and individual chance generator for himself, but I was surprised to see that he was second on the team last year, just to Kaprizov in scoring chance assists. He was second in shots per 60, second in primary shot assists per 60. So he's doing it all. He's generating for himself and he's helping generate for his line mates, right? The problem is, like you said,
even without the puck,
line mates. Yeah. So again, bad efficiency last year. I think, you have Kaprizov out for a big chunk of that year. Teams can match up a little differently to different players, right? So a full season of Cap, and if Hartman's away from Kaprizov, maybe he doesn't get the top defensive assignment, or he just gets a little bit better matchups for himself and for fantasy. And I think that his efficiency is probably going to take a bump up here. And I'm just a big fan of the player. So I hope he does get second line. I think that he could absolutely smash his ADP on Fantrax, which right now is 498, Ryan Hartman. And I've got him projected for 20 goals, 18 assists, 38 points. I think, again, very light projection. That's kind of a floor projection based on where I think he might line up, which is probably the third line. But if he does get that second line and some reasonable deployment on power play too, right? Because he only had a minute power play time on ice last year. If he can get that up to like a minute and a half, I mean, again, we're looking at potentially double-digit power play points. This is a guy that can easily get 45 points with some pretty nice per riffs, as well as some PIMs if you're in a penalty minute league, which are actually pretty fun. You ever play in any penalty minute leagues there, Louis?
I haven't, because I think that would drive me nuts.
It does. I've lost matchups because some ding dong takes a 10-minute misconduct on a Sunday night in the last minute of the game and then wins the category. And then I'm out in the cold losing my matchup 7-6 or something. It's like, what the hell? But it's just fun to like find these guys. Like I picked up Tom Wilson and 80th overall drafted ADP. He finished like 12th in the format. So things like that.
Oh, sorry. Really for a second, I thought you were talking about like a penalty minute one where it's like you get negative points for penalty minutes, which I have seen. But so the league I'm in does have points for PIMs. Like it's a points league head to head, but like they're not worth a ton. It's great. Like I've got Brady Tkachuk as one of my keepers. So I like that. But I've heard of leagues. I think, funnily enough, Corey from All Three Zones, I think I remember him posting about this a few years ago where he was in a league like that. And it was just insane. Yeah. Thinking about like you're completely avoiding guys like Tom Wilson because as much as he would do offensively, he's negating it completely with the penalties. It's a really funny format for sure, but I would lose my mind. Same for something like face-offs with that. I can't.
Yeah, I have a hard time with any leagues that give you negative points. Like even
Mhm.
even goalies, like obviously you're going to get negative points with goals, but like I hate being in leagues where that's like pretty steep, where it's like a bad goalie performance like sewers your whole night, Like I
So yeah, there was a night where I dropped Stuart Skinner was having an absolutely terrible week. I dropped him and I picked up Antti Ranta for a night. Antti Ranta let in, I believe it was 8 goals on 13 shots. They
oh my
didn't pull him. It was insane. I lost 30 points that night. Actually, not just that. I lost 30 points from Ranta. Skinner got a shutout, would have gotten me 30. It was a delta of 60 points that I'd lost in one decision. It was insane. I've never seen anything like it since or before.
That's so painful, man. I'm
Yeah.
sorry. I feel your pain. All right. That's, I've been there many times. It's like you start a guy and bench a guy, and the guy on the bench gets the shutout and the other guy gets shelled. It's just like, what the hell am I doing here? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Goalies are voodoo. That's why we don't draft them. All right, folks. All right, let's move on. We got to talk about one of my favorite players going into this year. This is a guy I'm planting my flag with here, not as a major fantasy value, just a one of the players I'm really interested in just to see how his career kind of unfolds. And that is Vader Svechkov of the Nashville Predators. Let's dig in on what this guy is doing here. I'll talk about what he did this season. Nothing groundbreaking. In fact, it's pretty unremarkable. 17 points in 52 games in his rookie season, 8 goals, 9 assists. That's whatever, right? He did get 5 points on the power play, which is power play 2, and just over a minute of power play time on ice. So that's not too bad. And just under 13 minutes average time on ice. So what the hell are we talking about Fedor Svechkov for? I talked a little bit with Nate in our projection show about Svechkov and just some of the things that I like about this player. And first off, I think that there is a really good opportunity for him to move into the top 6 in Nashville. And that's one of the things that's getting me a little bit excited, but that would take, Steven Stamkos moving to the wing. So, I'll preface that, but I mean, when you got a young guy like Fedor Svechkov, and I want to get your take on this here, Louis, coming in with the defensive acumen and play that he already possesses, that is going to set you up for more ice time moving forward, right? And I feel like this team, the Nashville Predators, they were so horrible last year. I mean, hemorrhaging shots and chances. They need a guy like this. They could lean in on a guy like this who's very detail-oriented and very committed to defense and sort of connecting the defensemen to the wingers. And that's something I really like about Svechkov. And Louis, I want you to talk a little bit about this viz that we're looking at. This is a new tool that you've got for Fedor Svechkov called the Battle Grid. And this is something you can check out on LB Hockey. I believe this is a free tool. Is that right?
Yes, yeah, this is free to everyone. It falls in our free tools category because it comes from one of our articles, specifically our line of blueprints articles. So those are the ones we saw it with the with Lehkonen with the offensive puck movement profile. And I've probably shown the consistency spread visualizer at some point in one of our past episodes. But so these are tools descending from articles where we essentially dive into one of the metrics that we measure and kind of how that's innovative in the hockey space, in the hockey analytics space, and how we can use it to evaluate players in different ways. So this article specifically was all about defining physicality and how a player can play through contact and really leverage their body in different areas of the ice and what that means on the team side of things. So in the article, we dove into a bit of how the Florida Panthers and all their players play together and how it's driven their success in the playoffs. And for players, we looked at Will Smith and how acclimating to NHL contact really helped him develop in the second half of the year. So on the Svechkov side, this is a player who I was I was looking at in 2021, another for the Sens pick. I really love that we're able to do this now because it's players that I've been able to draft or not draft, but scout at draft time.
Yep.
And now we can kind of see how that's changed since. Obviously, the Sens ended up going with Tyler Boucher instead. So, same level of player, really. But Svechkov, I was going through my notes, and what I had written down on him is that he was one of the best minds in the draft, with his awareness in all 3 zones being really astonishing, really reliable in all situations as a result, and could be the best and smartest defensive forward at the draft. Not a flashy guy, but still has some dynamism and instances of crafty thinking, with some good passing and just generally having the potential to be elevated with good line mates. And I think that still holds up, like, to this day. He still has one of the most well-rounded transition profiles amongst first-year players in my data, in terms of two-way transition impact in the neutral zone. very engaged defensively. Sure, the results weren't great, but as you said, that was on a porous Nashville team.
Yep.
And he's very highly involved as a playmaker on the offensive side. So all of the scouting notes, I think, his style hasn't had to change. And the really impressive part, as we said, and we're showing here in the battle grid, is his ability to shoulder contact. That's something that usually comes with time as a young player, and takes some good bit of experience to understand how much pressure you can welcome in without being overwhelmed and turning the puck over, and using your general gravity on the ice to turn it into an advantage, whether that's with the puck as a shooter, as a passer, or even off puck defending. So he doesn't necessarily seek it out very often. So one of the things we can see here is the proactive contact peripherals. So that is most of your usual peripherals you'd see in fantasy. So hits, takeaways, blocks, penalties drawn. Whenever a player is essentially going after a puck carrier to make contact, that is recorded in this category. And it's very low. So Svechkov last year, obviously his general fantasy impact from peripherals wasn't great, but everything else, he was willing to go down into the zone as a passer. He was getting engaged in off the forecheck and getting offense from that. Pretty solid in front of the net. In transition, he was, going after opposing carriers and stopping them or escaping them on entry and exit attempts. So I think that bodes well for his future in terms of converting that to fantasy output, because he's learning how much he can do. And then I think he'll go out and seek it once he's really calibrated it himself. So I think that bodes well for just his general fantasy value, because obviously the points will come. That's always something that develops. But this is an aspect that doesn't get evaluated, I don't think, enough. And Svechkov is an example of a player who could really improve his standing there.
Yeah, I love that. And I love this viz as well. Like it's just an interesting way to think about players and how they're sort of inviting contact or how they play through contact. And it's really nice to see that Svechkov, a young guy, he's only 22, is already kind of playing through contact like a seasoned veteran, right?
Yeah.
And again, that's something on the scouting report that I've read about Svechkov as well, just what a defensive mind he has. But yeah, for fantasy, we're going to want to see the offense, right? And like you said, he's going to need better line mates to do that. And that is really, I think, where I'm kind of staking my claim to Svechkov here, because I mean, we look at the top line there in Nashville. It was Stamkos centering. It was Philip Forsberg on the left side. It was Johnny Marchessault on the right side. Well, all three of these guys are right-handed, right? Which, I think can work out well on the power play. It did. The Preds had an okay power play, but at even strength, I feel like that's easier to defend, when you got three guys that are all right-handed. So I think Stamkos has had his better seasons, especially as of late, on the wing. So it makes sense to me that, like, first off, something needs to change. They can't just keep doing the same thing. Like last season was horrible, right? The Preds were really bad. They were also really unlucky, but let's put Stamkos on the wing. And if you put Stamkos on the wing, who's going to pop up to play center, right? I think Ryan O'Reilly would go up to the top line there. And then I do think there's an opportunity for Fedor Svechkov to play center with Stamkos on the wing, and then potentially, I don't know if it's Luke Evangelista or maybe Johnny Marchessault goes down, Evangelista plays up with Forsberg. Like, all this to say, I think that the Preds need to lean in to their young talent, and Svechkov is one of those guys, along with Evangelista, that I think they need to start feeding some ice time to and giving some opportunity to, because last year was atrocious. And when you got a guy like this, who's never going to hurt you defensively, right? He's already got that acumen there. And now, he's playing with better line mates. Like Steven Stamkos is probably due for a bounce back. He had a horrible year metrics wise, like worst of his career, right? I don't think that's going to happen again. So we're going to have a better version of Steven Stamkos. You got Svechkov, you got a young gun in Evangelista. Like, that's a nice line to me. And I projected him as such. And, this might be spicy, but I projected Svechkov for 40 points, which, he had what did he have last year? 17, a 27-point pace. So I'm projecting him for 40 points, right? Which is, maybe a little spicy. 17 goals, 23 assists. His ADP, it doesn't exist. All right, it's not on. He's not on the board. All right,
Really?
they aren't going out
Holy.
betting Svechkov in their drafts there in Fantrax. So again, I'm not saying we need to draft Svechkov, but it's a player that I'm watching moving forward. If he moves up the lineup, I'm still watching because I think there's a good chance that he's able to do something if he's able to get that 2C. And if he's not, a 3C with like a little bit more ice time, like we're still going to be looking at probably a 30-point player, right? Maybe a streamer you're interested in, a deep league streamer, right?
Yeah, deep league streamer for sure. But I do think there's a lot for him here. Like, I know you're saying 40 points might be a lot, but in my data, one of our badges is the breakout candidate badge. It's looking at a player's essentially point pace versus how they'd be expected to given all the metrics we track. And he ranks third in the league in terms of how, like, in terms of the differential between his expected and his actual point pace. So I think he's a guy that could definitely explode. He's a really good playmaker. And the three, this is not based on talent level, but general play style. His three similar styles here in our model at LB Hockey are Juraj Slafkovsky, Matthew Tkachuk, and Vincent Trocheck. Sure, those are pretty high-end players. You might not reach that level of efficiency there, but those are all players who bring value fantasy-wise, not just in terms of their points, but in terms of everything they do. So I think that's really a good indicator of how things may be trending for Svechkov.
That right there is the validation I needed, Louis. Oh my God. Now I'm picking him up in all my drafts. It doesn't even matter.
First round, baby. Let's go.
Yeah. All right. You know what? That's fine. All right. I'm in enough leagues. I can just throw one away and just pick all my favorites.
Yeah.
Totally fine. But yeah, watch list this man, see what he does this year. I think there's a real potential just career wise that he becomes a valuable guy. Maybe, I see him as kind of an Anton Lundell kind of guy as well. Maybe
that's a good comp.
Maybe he's more that kind of model. But again, Anton Lundell's, when he played up the lineup, we saw what he did last year, right? So
I was about to say he's going to get more opportunity, and when we saw Lundell get the opportunity, that's where he's shown. So
there you go. We have synergy right now, Louis, and it feels good. All right, it's like we know what we're talking about, and that's nice. All right, let's move over to the St. Louis Blues. We got to talk about Pavel Buchnevich. This is a guy that I've been getting in a lot of drafts. I'm doing a lot of mock drafts right now with our, we have an Apples and Ginos league, and we have kind of point settings there. So we're doing slow mock drafts. I've been getting Pavel Buchnevich in like the 12th round pretty consistently. And that feels pretty damn nice. Let's look at what Buchnevich was able to do last year. 76 games, 57 points. So that's a 62-point pace. Pretty nice, absolutely viable for fantasy. And he wasn't that efficient in doing it, right? This is a guy that's lived off efficiency his whole career, save for the past 2 seasons here in St. Louis, where that efficiency's kind of gone away. But what else went away is some of his shots, which is a little bit concerning. Pavel Buchnevich last year. And the power play production. He only had 12 power play points last year, which is not great, but minutes are still fine. Line mates are still fine. I mean, he's playing with an elite facilitator in Robert Thomas. Played with Jake Neighbors a lot last year. He was kind of a hammer out there, like guy at the end of passes. Talk to me about Pavel Buchnevich. Is this a guy that you think can sort of rebound from some of these lower end seasons that he's having? Because 62-point pace last year, despite the fact he was really inefficient, the shots were down, the power play points were down. Like that's kind of I'm interested in that. Like I feel like there's a lot more that could happen for Buchnevich if a couple things go right.
Yeah, Buchnevich was definitely the guy that I was struggling the most to land on what I wanted to highlight with him. Everyone else, that kind of seemed to be something jumping off the page. Crap, like I could have talked about Svechkov for years. But Buchnevich, it just seems like he's a known quantity at this point, yet doesn't get the respect he deserves, but has been declining. So like there's so many things that go so that I don't know where to place him, like, is he a sleeper? I guess, but like also he's shown that maybe he's going to keep decreasing with age, and I'm not really sure. But anyway, he's another kind of player similar to Hartman, where he's been one of my go-to add and drop guys in my 10-man league. But yeah, he has been steadily decreasing in not just fantasy utility, but his on-ice impact. If we look at we have the comparison atlas here. I'll talk about his comparisons to Kyrou a little later. But at the bottom middle, we have their SPAR timeline. So SPAR is just the abbreviation for standings points above replacement. So essentially an estimation of how many standings points a player contributes relative to a replacement level to their team. And it's been very steady. As a statistician, this linear decrease is making me feel some sort of way because you never see stuff like this out in the wild. But yeah, so it's not just the overall impact, but the shooting, the passing, and the checking have all seen kind of drops. And countering to like the Lekanen, where it was the defensive side that was falling. This is like the least ideal package you want to see on the decline. But there still is something there, as you said, 60-point pace is very strong, especially in a potential down year for him. And what intrigues me most is how similar he can be to Kyrou. Like, they both have a spot in the top 6, and I think Buchnevich might even currently be lining up on the first line while Kyrou's on the second. But I think it's more so of a 2 top 6 line rather than an established first and second. Like, Buchnevich currently is lining up next to Snuggerud, who's another guy who can help him and is coming in after a strong NCAA career. But Buchnevich has kind of been plagued with the more difficult deployment. Sure, him and Kyrie have both had more offensively leaning ones in the top 6 and power play time, but Buch gets significantly more penalty kill time and much more difficult competition. Like, the quality of competition has been harder, but he's kind of thrived against that given how difficult it's been. And that's actually given him the deployment defier badge, which we could see on his side there in bronze. Yes, Kyrou is the better player, in my opinion, and in many people's opinions, but Buchnevich plays a very similar style, as we can see by the shape of the radar charts here. So all of the moving out from the center is how good they are, which each ring showing a 25th percentile for the position. So Kyrou on the shooting side is close to the 100th percentile, and Buchnevich is close to the 75th. But their shape is very similar. So if Kyrou goes down and they need Buchnevich to put him into those easier, more offensive-leaning situations, he should be able to thrive really well, and that won't be much of a problem for, teammates to adapt or systems to. He's very much a plug-and-play there, and I think his dynamic offense would fare really well if he just gets a little bit more help on the deployment side from his coaching. And there's just generally an opportunity for interchangeability if St. Louis just wants to shake things up generally, or if Kyrou or another one of the dynamic pieces gets injured.
Yeah, that's a really interesting take, actually. It's just sort of the matchups that he's facing out there, and kind of he's getting those tougher matchups. And the good thing about St. Louis is they have some pieces here. They have some bits and pieces on the wing. Like, they got Jake Neighbors, they got Jimmy Snuggerud, they got Kyrou, they got Dylan Holloway, who broke out last year in a big way. I mean, these are all guys that could play in the top 6, right? And it'll be interesting to see how they sort of manage that. But I think one of the main things that I'm excited about with Buchnevich is where we're able to draft him. I think that people are just leaving this man for dead, right? Like, again, like 62-point pace in a down year. I really like that. And then when I dig in even more on some of the all 3 zone stuff, it turns out Buchnevich was 13th overall in the entire league in Corey's data in microstat game score. And what the microstat game score is, it's a combination of different things. It's rush offense, it's shot assists, it's zone entries and exits, it's retrievals, it's defensive plays. Buchnevich was 13th overall in the league, ahead of guys like McDavid, Draisaitl, Eichel, Nylander, Panarin, Jack Hughes. Buchnevich was ahead of all of them in that one metric, which is kind of an amalgamation of all those things. So he was also 88th percentile in scoring chance contributions per 60. So again, that's just microstat stuff, but this is still a guy that can do stuff out there. He's still a guy that's making offense happen, for lack of a better term, right? And I feel like there's these 2 last seasons unusually inefficient, right? And I also think his power play points, like 12 power play points, that is way low, right? Regardless of efficiency, regardless of even that kind of trending downwards that you mentioned, like, this guy should still be better than a 12 power play point guy, right? I could see him closer to, 18 to 22 power play points. I think that's where he should probably live. And I think that he's primed for a bounce back. Also on a team in St. Louis that has the 6th best schedule for off nights this season. So to me, Pavel Buchnevich is a target. I'm targeting him in and around the 12th round. Like, and I feel like I'm reaching for him. I feel like I don't want to let Buchnevich go any further, right? But people aren't targeting Buchnevich, but I kind of have been. I feel like this is a guy that I'm interested in. St. Louis too, they were one of the best teams in terms of conversion in the entire league. So always an efficient team, but that is a little bit dodgy. To expect them to continue to do that year to year. So that's something maybe against Buchnevich a little bit, but in terms of efficiency, Buchnevich was not efficient. Everybody else on the team was. So I feel comfortable.
He also was not consistent.
Yeah.
Like that was a big problem with him. Like yes, his microstat game score was high, but it like as opposed to previous years where it was a little more consistent, it was like great outings or like there's some like 30th percentile worthy ones pretty often here and there, which kind of brought his overall perception down. And I think that reflects in fantasy as well, right? Not just his on ice play, because he seems, and this probably goes more towards the last 2 or 3 years, but he seems like the kind of guy who, rather than getting a solid like 7 or 8 points in my league, for example, every other game, he'll average maybe towards the low sevens, but he'll get a night of 30, and then the rest of the week are like ones or twos, you know.
That's a good piece, because that's good to know as well, right? Streaky player.
Yeah.
I remember when he was playing with New York there, and I had for some reason I had him and Zibanejad that year, and I was kind of down. I was like fourth or something in the standings, and they popped off for a massive like 2 games or something where Zibanejad got like 4 goals, Buchnevich got 5 points. So
that could have been the Zeba 5-goal game in there, and Buchnevich gets a bunch of
assists. It was incredible. Like I just vaulted up to the top and like never looked back. So maybe I've got a soft spot for Buchnevich, but that is a really good point that he is, not as consistent as we'd like to see for fantasy. And it's, the last 2 seasons in particular, maybe it's kind of boom or bust. So it'll be interesting to see what happens here. But again, I think at the cost that you need to draft Buchnevich, I think it's a swing absolutely worth taking. I projected him for 63 points next year, 23 goals, 40 assists. His ADP currently on Fantrax 162. So, fill your boots. You got Buchnevich out here. This is a guy that should be on power play 1, and he's going to get the biz. So I don't know. Louis, are you picking up Pavel Buchnevich anywhere? What are you doing?
I think so. I mean, again, it's the kind of player where I could see the general public course correct closer to when the season starts, because that does seem a little low. But you're right. It's not. I mean, he can be flashy, but I don't think as an option he's very flashy. So it's very much up in the air. I'm not sure. I wouldn't say that he's one of my guys, but he's definitely someone I'm eyeing later on in the draft, because if he falls, like that could be tremendous value, especially for if you need someone that could explode, especially on the point side of things. That's a really great option that low.
Yeah. All right. You heard it here first, folks. All right. You got the LB stamp of approval. Pavel Buchnevich. All right. I'm putting words into your mouth, Louis, but that works for my narrative. All right. Let's talk about Utah. And, we're going to go off board here. We're going to talk about some spicy tendies. All right. We're talking about Karel Vejmelka and Connor Ingram, and just the potential for some 0G gold, this upcoming season here. And one of the things that's going to be fun about this is just talking about Utah as a team in general and some of their tendencies and who might be the guy here that we're going to be interested in drafting. So they're digging in on these 2 goalies. There's obviously some main differences here, isn't there, Louis? It's we got a guy in vegetable lasagna, Karel Vejmelka. He's a very athletic, very big. He's kind of this all or nothing kind of goalie, very explosive kind of goalie. Maybe not as technical, whereas Connor Ingram is that rock in net, the technically sound, just having pucks hit him as opposed to these, big time saves that Karel Vejmelka is doing off of high danger chances. So talk to me a little bit about Utah, and then talk to me a little bit about these 2 goalies and who you think is going to run with the net there.
Yeah, it's sorry, I saw vegetable lasagna and I'm craving moussaka, which is like an eggplant lasagna thing.
That, yeah.
I love me some moussaka. Anyway, not the point. But yeah, so we kind of built this idea for Utah in our DMs before the show, when I was like, I don't know like how I feel about Utah. When I feel like I could pick a goalie, but I couldn't land on one. So for the past couple of years, I've been picking up essentially whoever emerges as Utah's starter within the first month of the season. I'd gone with Ingram the year before, then I even drafted him with my last pick, and he ended up being awful, so I dropped him for Vejmelka, and Vejmelka was on my team for the rest of the year. But yeah, so that's essentially consistently turned into my number 2 or 3 goalie for the rest of the season. And looking at, I as you said, I really like what this allows us to do for evaluation on the team side of things, because that's at LB Hockey anyway, been one of the big focuses for the first half of 2024-25, because like all of our other dashboards were more player focused. And while that's where I like to do most of my analysis, that still leaves a lot for what you can do with the teams specifically. So here is our team cards. And I think, this is 2024-25 for Utah, and it connects to the Arizona team just to see how the roster itself has evolved. But yeah, so since COVID, I would say their goaltending, except for 2021-22 where it dips there,
Yep.
has been around league average as a team, which is pretty crazy to say given how bad some of those teams were. Like that 2021-22 Coyotes team, that's where the dip was. Arguably the worst team season in my track data. I pulled up the card and I immediately switched off of it because it was
You were
assaulting
triggered.
my eyes.
Yeah.
It was really bad. And I do think, like, we see the finishing dip, meanwhile. They had been very consistent before that. But if that finishing doesn't fall to, I think it was last or second last in the league this year, they're a playoff team. So I'm maybe not convinced, but I have a pretty good sense that, one of their goalies does decent enough and the team plays well enough around them that they can kind of continue to that and drive to a playoff spot. Now, there's, as you said, Ingram is... he's been a bit more solid, except last year was really tough for him. He was arguably a top 10 goalie in the league in 2023-24. And I think in terms of system fit for Utah, he's probably the better goalie moving forward. Ingram's middling results against some cycle and passing plays has been masked a little by Utah's play, given that they've had really great pressure suppression and their cycle defense metrics last year, as we can see in the team blueprint, were really strong. Whereas Vizmelka has historically been a little weaker against net front plays and rush chances. And Utah, as you mentioned, or showed in the slide before this, they're great with the puck on the rush, but defending it's really bad. The thing that will help Vizmelka, though, yes, he was a top 10 goalie in the league last year and probably a top 50 player overall. He was that good in nets for them. They've essentially got half of a brand new decor, right? They missed John Marino for most of the season, who's, one of the better rush defense and just strong skating defenders. Dursey was gone a lot, who's got a good stick control and transition denial rates. And then you're adding in Nate Schmidt. And I think that's the sneaky key here to help Vizmelka, because Nate Schmidt, despite being, obviously he had a big part of winning over there in Florida, but he's a little forgotten about in terms of how well he is at defending the blue line, both in terms of denying entries and stopping rush chances from even happening in the first place. I think he places top 5 league-wide over the last 3 years. So, there's things that could make you go either for Ingram and Vizmelka. I think just keep an eye on him. Don't draft any of them. This follows the 0G strategy with Apples and Ginos. And just keep an eye on those guys and make sure to pull the trigger once there's a strong feeling of which of those two guys is emerging as a starter. I'd say probably around 2 to 4 weeks in.
Yeah, I mean, I hope that would be the case. These guys would be available on the waivers, but I think Utah has had a glow up. And I feel like, Vizmelka is going to be drafted, right? And obviously, like we should mention, Ingram is still like we don't know his health status going into the season here. He was in the NHL Player Assistance Program, and I was digging in just to see if there's any update there. We haven't heard anything, but I mean, if he's back and ready to rock, this is an interesting conversation. And again, it's just about which goalie is going to fit the play style of Utah. And I don't know, I'm kind of leaning Vizmelka a little bit. And the reason I say that is that Vizmelka in Utah sort of reminds me of Markstrom in New Jersey, right? We got two really that get a lot of rush chances back the other way. And Markstrom in particular really thrives in chaos, loves to make those athletic acrobatic saves. And I kind of see a little bit of that in Vizmelka as well. I feel like he's the more athletic, the more acrobatic goalie. I mean, maybe second chances, he's not so good, right? Where Connor Ingram maybe has that locked down. But I feel like the high danger chances against that Utah is probably going to be giving up based on their play style. I feel that Vizmelka might be better served to save those high danger chances. That's just my 2 cents. And obviously, Vizmelka was 12th in the league last year in goals saved above expected. He had an awesome year. He was catching bullets in his teeth and really giving the team a chance to win. Whereas Ingram the year before, he was the same way, right? He had a great goal saved above expected, very efficient in his movements, definitely the more technical of the two goalies, but we do have that health concern. And I think that Vizmelka is going to be the incumbent. I think he's going to be starting game 1 moving forward. I think he's the one that we're drafting, but with this whole conversation being had, I think Ingram is a player that we need to watch, right? Because whether he's healthy coming into the year, that's the guy who's going to be on the waivers, right? And then to your point, 3 weeks in, let's see what's going on, right? Has Ingram taken the net? Because if so, you got to pick him up right away. Because,
jump on it. Yeah,
I think Utah is, like I talked about Dallas being one of my favorite teams. My next favorite team, Utah. All right, for fantasy, these guys are like, it's a wagon offensively. They have so much good young talent. I mean, Keller, Paterka now, Gunther, geez. All right. And then, Sergachev on the back end, like it's just crazy. So I'm excited about this team. But yeah, I should also mention, I've had Kevin Woodley on the show a bunch of times, and he's a really big fan of Connor Ingram. Like,
yes, I love listening. Like, honestly, whenever he's on the PDO cast, that's an immediate listen. And funnily enough, Kevin Woodley was the inspiration for the goalie cards. Obviously, it was I was probably going to get to them eventually, but I built most of the metrics from just listening to him talk about goalies, mostly on the PDO cast, and writing down notes and thoughts I had while listening to it, because he's definitely my favorite goalie analyst out there, because he just understands the position so well and everything that goes into it. It's always like a joy, like, just to listen to what he has to say about the position.
Yeah, it's one of my favorite interviews. I get him on every year, twice if I can, because he's just so insightful, and you really feel like you're getting insider information on the position, which is so difficult to predict. So plus he's got amazing access to some metrics. I don't remember what it's called. What is it? Goal line? No, Instat. Oh dang!
It's oh my god.
Called? Goal line. I can't remember the statistics that he has access to, but we've looked it up here at Apples and Ginos. It's like thousands of dollars. So we can't afford that right now, but that is information I'd love to see. And that's some of the stuff that
is it ClearSight?
ClearSight Analytics. That's what it is. Yeah. So anyway, shout out to Kevin, shout out to ClearSight Analytics, and shout out to Vejmelka and Connor Ingram. I feel like that's going to be an interesting piece 3 weeks in. Keep your eyes peeled for what happens. Let's move on to the last player here, Louis. We're getting long in the tooth, but I appreciate your time. We got to go to the Winnipeg Jets, and we got to talk about Neil Pionk. All right. And this is a guy that you sort of brought to the table. So I'm interested to hear your thoughts on Neil Pionk. But one of the things I love about Neil Pionk, obviously, he's the power play insurance here for Josh Morrissey. If Josh Morrissey goes down with injury, Pionk is the one that's going to be running that top power play. And Winnipeg's power play was pretty damn good last year. Also, Neil Pionk, like, if we look at what he was able to do last year, 69 games, 39 points, that's a 46-point pace. That's excellent. Like, a 46-point pace for this guy. Obviously, Winnipeg played, unbelievable last year, but a 46-point pace for kind of a second pairing defenseman or not your top offensive option is exactly what you want to see. He's getting buku minutes, averaged just over 22 minutes time on ice, and had 12 points on the power play as well. So he's bringing a lot to the table. I should mention as well, like, his hits were down last year. He had 114 in 69 games and 101 blocks. So the periffs are great. But the year before, in 82 games, he had 221. So this guy's a mega beefer. He does that. I think there's some sneaky offense here as well with Neil Pionk. Talk to me about this player and what you like about him.
So I know there's a lot of people, and myself included, who have been down on Neil Pionk in different years, but you just can't deny the volume at which he makes things happen on the ice. And that's endeared him a lot to the coaching staff. And as a result, as you said, he's got a very secure spot there. Yeah. So here we have the development matrix. So it essentially plots the frequency of a player's skills, so how often they use it, versus the success rate. And I don't think I've ever seen anything like this for a player, especially like someone who's, are pretty much playing as a number 3 or number 2 DU on the second pair. Everything is on the more than average frequency side, almost, except one of them is barely on the, like, he does everything on the ice. Some of it can be good or bad, and the efficiency and the outcome can vary sometimes. But on the fantasy side, a lot of what's driven in terms of value is volume. And that's really what matters here. And that's what I think makes Pionk such a good option. I like to compare him a little bit to Filip Hronek, who gets a little more exposure rather than Pionk. I do think Pionk, when I checked Yahoo from my league anyway, was projected to get more points. But to me, I've just found that Hronek has a better reputation on that side. And because they're both easily the number one right D on a team with an elite lefty. Sure, Quinn Hughes is way better than Morrissey, but they're both very good. Very high all situations workload for both. Signed to long-term $7 million ish deals. Saw massive jumps last year in SPAR impact, and that's one thing that I think will help Pionk a lot, is that he kind of went back up to that level to where his reputation had been, especially on the coaching side of things before. And if he can sustain that, that'd be really huge for him. And I do think they just have similar playing styles, some dual threat offense, nothing too dynamic or groundbreaking, but enough to supplement plays with both their shooting and passing ability, and some solid just general ability to suppress chances against. And again, that gives him a bit of a longer leash because he's at least fairly good defensively. They're going to trust him. And you don't have to look further than that Game 7 against St. Louis last year. Oh my God, like Morrissey went down and Pionk was just elevated. And the dude, I don't remember how many minutes he played, but he was a dog. Like the dude just knows when to stand out, and he goes out and grabs it. And he obviously ended up getting the shot that eventually got tipped for the double OT winner. And I do think he's one of the best complete options for a fantasy player at around where he'd get drafted, especially on a physical side. As you said, I think there could be an uptick back in terms of the hits, and just what he does in all three zones really helps him and is conducive to value everywhere for him moving forward.
I love that. I forgot about that game. I'm just looking at it now. He played
I'll never forget, man.
46 minutes and 15 seconds in
in
that game there. 3 assists, massive 6 hits, 4 blocks. The guy was popping the hell off. Yeah. So, I mean, I love that. And digging in on, again, some of the all three zone stuff, like this is a guy that shows out in zone entries leading to chances, right, from the back end. I love to see that, right? He's able to drive offense to some degree. And also, I think he's really found some nice chemistry with Dylan Sandberg there.
And Sandberg, what a player. My God. Yeah. Sure, not the biggest fantasy threat, but just it's super impressive how he's been.
Yeah, I mean, you look at the success of the team, and then you look at the individual parts, right, and what happened there. But like Sandberg's, he's an underrated, unheralded guy. But I mean, paired with Neil Pionk, these guys were tilting the ice out there. They had like a 53% Corsi for percentage at even strength, and they outscored their opponents 44-23 in over 700 minutes together. So really a nice pairing, and that's not even your top pairing, right? He's still got Josh Morrissey out here. So I mean, the Jets
and Dylan DeMello, another Sens legend who I've always loved. It's just it's finally, yes, I'm partial to the Jets. I literally have my Hellebuck jersey behind me right now. But they finally have, I think, a complete top four, which is what they've been missing for a good bit of time.
Yep.
And it just means that the workload won't be so concentrated on either Morrissey or Pionk if they force him to be like the shutdown guy. And I think that'll help a lot to unlock opportunities that maybe weren't there before.
Yeah, no, it's a really good point. And obviously, like, we got to look at what the Jets did last year, and there's a reason behind that, right? And look no further than their top four. Like, this is one of the best top fours in the league, and it's underrated, right? You wouldn't call these guys one of the best top fours, but obviously Winnipeg reaped the rewards of that. So my man, that's it. That's what we did. An hour 17, Louis. Oh God, that's, you know what? This is good stuff. I could go a lot longer, so I have to literally stop myself from doing this. But really appreciate having you here. Everybody, definitely go on over to lb-hockey.com. Check out all the tools that Louis has available there. There's a bunch of free ones. If you want to subscribe, that's money well spent. I've been subscribed for a bunch of months now, and I use these things pretty much every day. So I love the work you're doing over there. Again, why don't you tell the people where they could find you, what's going on, and anything coming down the pipe here for you.
Yeah, so I mean, already you gave a great ad there for LB Hockey, but yeah, check us out there, lb-hockey.com. Just came out with a new article that I mentioned earlier and been getting a lot of props for. So if you're into kind of building that bridge between what you see with hockey and the data behind it and how you can kind of bring them all together. This one specifically on physicality, I'd highly recommend it. And again, that comes with the free Battle Grid tool. There's a bunch more that come with other articles that you can catch up on if you want. And as Blake said, subscribe, because it's my full-time job currently, and every subscription makes it so I can keep working on it even longer and continue to make this stuff to help everybody. But yeah, so socials wise, you can find me on Bluesky mostly. At Louis Boulet, so LOUISBOULET.bsky.social. Also on Instagram at lb.hockey_. Getting the handle there was a whole thing. Anyway, but yeah, that's pretty much it in terms of future projects for LB Hockey. Still back on the coding side of things. Probably some new metrics will be in the multi-year cards, doing some reorganizing there that I think will be nice. Getting to the point where I'm starting to look at standings and player projections. So that's probably going to come out in September, which is going to be a fun little social media series of posts. So make sure to follow us over there. Probably going to post it on Twitter as well too. So all of those social medias, make sure to follow us there and keep up for what's coming next.
I love this stuff, man. I appreciate the work you do. It just makes my job a lot easier when I'm trying to dig in on these players, and gives me a lot of context that I wouldn't have had normally. So appreciate you, my man. Thank you so much for being here. And thank you, listeners, for being here as well. That's all we've got for this episode. All right. Hopefully it brought you some value and helped you get just a little bit better at fantasy hockey today. All the advanced stats you heard came from lb-hockey.com, natural stat trick, all 3 zones. All right. That's good stuff over there. Many thanks to the band. They're there for supplying the music for the podcast. Be sure to check out their Spotify as well. That's it, everybody. Celebrate your day. Bye for now.